A second one is to think a little bit about how economics actually applies to the rest of the real world, right? So it's different for everyone. For me, I was just interested in economic principles. Some people think that economics is just about, oh, I don't know, the stock market, or it's just about finance or the macroeconomy. Actually, economics is just about it's a certain study of rationality in human behavior, and there are economists that study things that are very, very esoteric. They study things like the institutions that comprise our society and how those evolve and how that contributes to cultural outcomes that we observe. There are economists that study human decision making at a very mathematical level, and then there are those that study it at the experimental and behavioral level. There are economists that study the organization of firms in the economy, that's called industrial organization, and then there are those that study phenomena like the gender pay gap and racial pay gaps. So those are economists that kind of do what's called applied economics. So you have to find your own interest, but economics is actually quite a big tent. So you can go very broadly in terms of the type of social scientific subject that you are interested in, and you'll see that economics probably has something to say about that. For my best friend, he was interested always in reading The Economist, which is a magazine, a weekly news magazine. Yep. And that is another way to kind of sustain and build your interest, because you're reading about how economics plays out in the real world in different countries worldwide.
Right.
So that's like find your passion and use that to drive what would otherwise be potentially very textbook study of models and equations that can get dry if you don't quickly relate it back to your original passion and interest.
So Jamus, I do have students who ask me, Mr. Teo, I like what I do in JC Econs. So JC Econs, there's no math involved. It's a lot about essay writing, and they're kind of aware that they have to level up their math, and they are not really confident with that. So what is your advice for this younger audience who is actually not very confident with that, but they really have a genuine interest to pursue economics? What's your biggest takeaway or tip for that?
Well, perhaps the biggest takeaway is don't give up your love for writing. In fact, as a practicing economist, whether you decide to become an academic or whether you decide to become a professional economist that serves industry, writing is one of the most important things you can do, right? After all the analysis that you do in the background, you need to communicate this. And your ability to communicate this and to communicate it well is fundamental to your subsequent success as an economist. So I would say definitely don't give up writing. Economists, unfortunately, a lot of professional economists do give that up, and then they end up writing in a very dry style, which nobody cares about. And so no matter what you say, you never get any traction. So definitely stay the path, stay interested in writing, but you need to be better at expository writing. So to be able to develop logical arguments with what you write. And then what's nice with the math is that it imposes a discipline, right? So Paul Krugman, who's currently a New York Times columnist, but also a Nobel Prize winner in economics, a very famous economist, he once argued that the way he thinks about describing economics or the way a given theory or model works is that first he builds up that model mathematically, and then he asks the model what it implies when you introduce various perturbations, various shocks to the model, and what the model then spits out. And then he takes all that, he builds his intuition around that, and then he strips away all the math, and he then repeats what the model has therefore come up with, and he builds the intuition by explaining how the moving parts work in English, or whatever your preferred language is. All the math.